Hey everybody, Derek here to bring another video for The Walking Dead Season 6. And this video is going to be my review for episode 13 of Season 6, which was The Same Boat. My overall impression of the episode was that it was absolutely amazing. That was a very well written, well acted, and just very suspenseful episode from start to finish. And I really think the conclusion was probably one of the most suspenseful, dramatic conclusions that they have ever done on The Walking Dead. I got to give kudos to them, and kudos to Melissa McBride and Lauren Cohen for doing an amazing job on this episode. Really, really great. So I'm going to get this video started. If you have not watched the episode and you do not want to be spoiled in any way, then I would exit the video now, because otherwise you will be spoiled. Okay. So, the whole point of the episode was really to resolve the cliffhanger from last week. We have Carol and Maggie being captured by 4 members of the Saviors, a man named Donnie who was wounded in the arm by Carol. We have Michelle, who had a mole on her chin. We had Molly, also known as Malls, who was a little bit older. She smoked, and turns out she's probably dying from lung cancer or something because she was coughing up blood. And then we have Paula, who was played by Alicia Witt. And they basically are able to take Carol and Maggie hostage. They talk with Rick's group and, try to engage the situation to figure out, what the best outcome might be. And basically, Paula doesn't feel comfortable, making any kind of a deal at this time or trying to take on Rick's group because they're outnumbered. It's clear that these, people had probably heard what was going on and got out and ran into Carol and Maggie. And what they end up doing is they take Maggie and Carol back to this safe house that has a bunch of rooms with walkers at various points that would basically, keep people out. It's almost like a maze, if you will. It was very well set up and very dangerous to maneuver. And at this point, the concern is, well, what's going to happen? Are they going to make a deal? Are they not going to make a deal? And a lot of things really happened in this episode, and I think the best way to review it is kind of engaging, the different groups and what was going on, because it really was very well written, very well acted, a lot of great things going on. But what we see with the Saviors is that, you see a group of people who really, the camaraderie is kind of very interesting because, that it kind of wasn't there, but it was there. It just seems like each person that is a Savior is able to hold their own very well, given the circumstances. And, what we saw was because Donnie was bleeding out, he became irrational, and he ended up attacking Maggie and Carol, and both of them were able to fight him off, and Paula ends up knocking Donnie out, and he bleeds to death from his gunshot wound that Carol gave him earlier in the episode. And, from that point, it was really, about figuring out what was going to be best and really learning about all of the characters from that point. Because we saw a lot of Carol in this episode, and what we saw was Carol in a very different light. And I kind of, wonder at this point, how much of it was her really acting versus how much of it was really real and Carol dealing with something. Because, in the last episode, we saw a different Carol. We saw someone who had really, changed quite a bit, who hadn't had to deal with any dangerous situations, hadn't had to kill anybody, was basically maintaining this, role that she had been playing before in season 5 when she was, undercover. But at this point, it was really like a real persona. It was something she was able to, act on, cooking for the community, smiling, being that mother figure, engaging in a relationship with Tobin. And now she's thrust back into the situation of, being in danger and maybe having to kill. And what we see is that Carol actually dreads it now. We see a change in Carol because when she gets captured and taken into the room, she begins to hyperventilate. Now, again, whether this is for real or whether this was, an acting, by Carol, I'm not sure. It might have been a little of both. And, you kind of see that along the way, Carol, rather than, trying to find ways to, kill, she's actually trying to find the more peaceful route. And it doesn't become apparent until time goes on and we see what's happening. Because throughout the episode, again, first Carol hyperventilates, then she presents herself kind of, in a weak manner. She steals a rosary across from a walker and almost seems to play off like she was either a nun or she's very religious and wouldn't, do terrible things to survive, which gives the impressions to the saviors that Carol is weak. And they do believe that, as time goes on in the episode. And after Donnie dies, Maggie and Carol are separated, and Carol stays with Paula. And basically we see this, this difference in opinion. We see how Paula, as a character, she really is somebody who is in control of, her group. And I also think that she is very ruthless, as well as, she distances herself from attachments, which I think she thinks makes her stronger as a survivor. Because when Donnie died, she didn't give a hoot. She basically said, hey, all he was a warm body. Doesn't really matter to me what happens to anybody. At this point, we're all just, barely hanging on. And the quote, the same boat, comes from Molly, because she was smoking cigarettes in the episode, but she was coughing up blood, which makes me think she's dying of lung cancer. And basically she says, well, I'm a dead woman walking. We both are, so we're in the same boat. And I think it was really, equal to the situation. We have the women in this group obviously in trouble because Rick's group is probably on their way. Plus, what are they going to do with Carol and Maggie? Are they going to be able to make it out alive? And it's hard to say. But we see Carol frequently, trying to reason with Paula, to basically state, hey, make the deal, go through with the trade, and then you guys can leave. And, she wants that to happen. She doesn't want Paula to die, but Paula doesn't end up taking the deal. Basically what ends up happening is near the end of the episode, Paula, hears she doesn't hear static on the radio when Rick talks to her, which would make it seem like he's close. So she doesn't trust what's going on. And the saviors actually have reinforcements coming their way to help them. So there's other people coming, and they're trying to prepare for that as well. So what they end up doing is Paula says, well, we're not going to take this deal. We're going to get moving, and kind of give the implication that they're going to kill Carol and Maggie. So they leave the room to start killing walkers, and Carol ends up getting loose, and Maggie is also able to get loose. And the two of them end up, coming back together. And Maggie in this episode, we see her in a much, kind of light that we see in season 3. Like I mentioned, before, when Maggie was able to kill that guy in Woodbury with the walker bone, she stabbed him in Woodbury. We kind of saw that same Maggie. We kind of saw someone who was ready for battle, and she was ready to kill. She basically says, Carol wants to take the peaceful route out. She wants to say, hey, let's just leave them. Let's go. Let's get out of here. And Maggie says, no, we finish the job, they die. And Carol's kind of like, oh my gosh, So we kind of see this role reversal. I mean, Maggie in a sense has always been more of like the diplomatic kind of person, more, prone to being like Glenn. Even though she has killed people, she wasn't to the extent that Carol was. But now we see a lot of role reversal. And I think a lot of that has to do with, one, how dangerous the Saviors are. Two, the fact that, Maggie is pregnant, she is going to have a child, and she wants to do whatever she can to protect that child. And again, it goes from, with this thought of Carol being like a mother figure versus actually being a mother expecting, like with Maggie. I think it made Maggie take a more aggressive stance. And what ends up happening is, at the end of the episode, we see Maggie going into the room, and Donnie was not put down, so he's coming back as a walker. They tie him on a leash with a rope, and when Molly comes into the room, she gets bit by Walker Donnie. And at that point, Maggie comes in and basically beats Molly to death with a gun, crushing her skull. So that takes down two of them, and from that point, we have Michelle and Paula who are still left. Well, Paula and Michelle both realize, oh, crap, they got away and they killed two of our people. And Paula ends up confronting the two of them in the hallway, as well as Michelle later on. And Paula just basically, in a sense, taunts Carol. She says, oh, well, you're weak. You can't do this. You can't kill me. And basically, Carol does not want to. Carol gives her the option to leave, to run, to get out. And while this is going on, one of the walkers actually ends up grabbing Carol, and the gun goes off and it wounds Paula. And then at this point, Michelle and Maggie are fighting. And while this is going on, Michelle pulls out a knife, slashes at Maggie, and I think it only cut her shirt. I don't think it actually cut her skin. But once that slash went through the shirt, Carol, jumped right back into action and killed Michelle, shot her in the head. We get back to a moment with Paula, and basically at that point, she tries to give her another option, but they end up fighting, and Paula ends up impaled on like this skewer that's hanging out of the wall and gets bit by a walker and also dies. So Maggie and Carol take care of their captors. And at the end of the episode, we see Carol telling Maggie, she's killed 20 people now. And she wonders if not killing is the right thing to do, or if killing should have been something. We see this conflict within her. Whereas before we saw Carol who, hey, there's a threat, I got to kill it. Now it seems like Morgan's teachings have rubbed off on her a little bit. And I'm going to go into more detail with that with another video. I think that it's definitely worth expanding on a bit more. But what ends up happening is at the end of the episode, the reinforcements come. Maggie, and Carol had poured gasoline in a room, and when the reinforcements go in, they burn them alive with a cigarette that Carol throws into the room. So they kill the Saviors, they meet back up with Rick's group, and basically, at this point, Primo is still in their custody. And, we see that Carol is just not doing okay. She flat out tells Daryl, I'm not okay. What happened was terrible. And, we get the two of them having a hug, very emotional moment between the two of them. So then Rick talks with Primo again, excuse me, and basically asks him about the bike and about Negan. He says, look, who was Negan? Was he at the building? And Primo turns around and says, well, I'm Negan. And Rick says, well, I'm sorry it had to turn out like this, and shoots Primo in the head and kills him, thinking that he was Negan. And this shocks Carol. We see Carol looking, in just shock and sadness, and we see blood dripping from the rosary that she's holding. I'm assuming that was Primo's blood, that some of his blood maybe, went off and hit the rosary. That was my assumption. But, this episode was just intense all around. And there were a couple of other things that were noteworthy as well. One of the things that Molly said earlier in the episode when Carol was kind of talking with him, Carol earlier in the episode was trying to justify why the group killed T's group on the road, which was back in episode 9 with Daryl blowing up the Saviors on the road. She basically says, well, your people attacked us first. We didn't have a choice. And, at that point, they start to talk about the groups and say, well, Negan, had ordered that. We needed to take care of Negan. And Negan sounds like a maniac. And Molly said, well, we're all Negan. And I think that this is really, symbolic of, Negan's influence has spread into all of these individuals. And I think that really each one of them is expected to do things that Negan would be able to do through him. And basically it would do a couple of things. One, it would make each one of them just as dangerous. Two, it would also confuse people. I think that these people are so loyal to Negan that they would be willing to identify themselves as him in order to, protect Negan from people who don't know who he is. And I think that's a lot of the reason why the group said that, but also to instill this fear. When they say we're all Negan, it kind of shows this uniformity, this influence, this power that this man has over these individuals that would make them say and do these things. So that was significant. And we also had a moment where it looks as though Michelle, the woman with the mole that was talking with Maggie, she was missing the upper part of her pinky finger. And she says, well, it got cut off because I stole. I ended up stealing a, car to go find my father's body. And, what ended up happening was, she got caught, and that was her punishment. So we kind of see these hints of, potential punishments, physical punishments like this happening to individuals later on in the season, that we see this type of punishment being used in the comics and in the TV show. So a lot of different developments. Very, very interesting episode. There's so much more I want to talk about. And I definitely will. I have some videos coming out with Carol, Maggie, as well as a lot of the other characters after episode 12. I think there's a lot to talk about here, and I'm definitely going to go into detail more. So thank you for watching. What an incredible episode. Season 6, Part 2 has just been so incredible, and I can't wait to see what is next. So with that, I'm going to bring this video to a close. I want to thank all of you for watching. If you have any questions or comments, don't be afraid to leave them. Feel free to subscribe. I do have more videos coming. And if you have any suggestions for future videos that you would like to see, don't be afraid to suggest them. I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and thank you very much for watching.